The Bishop of Reading has stepped into a political row tonight over knife crime here in the south. The Right Reverend Olivia Graham has said that there is a direct link between the rise of knife crime in the region and a decade of cuts in funding of youth services, something that the government strongly disputes. The Bishop was speaking after taking part in a memorial for 13-year-old Ollie Stevens, who was stabbed to death by two teenagers in Reading a year ago this week. Well, the Thames Valley, which of course includes Reading, had the highest rate of knife crime here in the south last year, with 58 cases per 100,000 people. That was closely followed by Sussex and Surrey. While in recent years, the charity BerkshireYouth says more than 90 centres for young people have been closed in that county alone. Jo Campbell has the story.
You right, guys?
If Kelly here
Just thought I'd come say hi.
wants to talk to young people, she has to go find them. In a world where grown-ups can often be viewed as out of touch, her role to provide a listening ear and adult voice.
Young people don't have a safety net around them as much as maybe they used to, because they're much more exposed to the things that are going on within their communities. Now that means that you do need adults within that network to step in and kind of, I guess, be a voice of reason.
And without that voice, well, shared videos and online chats leads to a community gathering to remember a murdered teenager, according to the Bishop of Reading.
The increase in teenage knife crime and teenage deaths from knife crime has been in direct inverse proportion to the amount of funding which has been put into youth services. So youth services have been underfunded over the last decade, and it's not a coincidence that knife crime has gone up.
Britain's not had a national youth strategy for almost a decade now, and in the intervening years, well, budgets have been cut and cut again. And with much of what youth workers do not something councils are obliged to provide by law, well, that's meant some 355 youth worker posts have gone from here in Berkshire, and some 92 youth centres have closed. Government says knife crime has fallen since 2019, though that coincides with periods of lockdown. Also, just under £2 million has been promised for a Thames Valley violence reduction unit and a scheme to help police identify and target hotspots. But those working with young people say successive governments have concentrated on intervening when things have already gone wrong, rather than preventing problems in the first place.
The point of being a teenager is to explore those boundaries, test those boundaries, and be a teenager, be an adolescent. That's a journey we all have to go through. But it needs safety, and it needs some guidance, and it needs some boundaries to keep it safe. Young people need that safe space. And we've taken all those safe spaces away. We've just decimated safe spaces. So I think that's something, governments should hang their heads in shame.
Ministers say all organisations have to work together to keep young people from harm. Critics question whether the government is doing its share of the job. Jo Campbell, BBC South Today, Newbury.
We asked the Home Office for an interview tonight, but no one was available. Anne Longfield, though, was the Children's Commissioner until last year and continues to work for young people, chairing the Independent Commission on Young Lives. I spoke to her earlier and started by asking whether she agreed that there was a link between cuts in youth services and the rise in knife crime.
If you have a real reduction in the number of good things that are going on for young people, the number of safe places, the number of adults around looking out for them and inspiring them and the like, then it's going to be a very negative impact on them. And if you just think that difference it could make, if you've got a dark kind of area, a park, if you've got a youth centre going on, you've got lights on, you've got kids around, you've got adults around, you've got good things going on. If you don't have that, you've got a potentially very dangerous area. And that, I think, is a concern we should all have.
You're a former Children's Commissioner up until last year. What do you think the wider problem is here?
Well, certainly, I think this is a group of young people that isn't getting enough attention in terms of policy, in terms of funding. and in terms of support, but a lot as well is being fueled by social media that is now, of course, just an everyday part of growing up for young people. And so often parents don't know what's going on. They can't rely on the old ways to warn and protect their children, because actually this is all new territory. And if you put some of the very toxic language that goes on social media, along with the fact that there's very few safe places to go for kids in the evenings or after school, then you're getting quite a dangerous mix there.
What do you think needs to be done, Anne, in the future to resolve all of this?
What we really want to do is put the spotlight on the lived experience of these teenagers. You know, they have their whole lives ahead of them and all the positive things that can bring. But too often policy doesn't focus on what that reality is, doesn't give them the support they need. So what I want to see is, I'd love to see schools staying up and into the evenings and indeed weekends. I'd like to see a resurgence of youth clubs, you know, good things going on near to home, and that's what kids say themselves. But also I'd like really services to be able to work very hard to identify those kids that are at particular risk and be able to step in early before crisis hits.
Anne Longfield, thank you for your time this evening. Bournemouth and